And here we go. All right. So Dr. Tim Jackson received his undergraduate degree in health science and chemistry from Wake Forest University. He is educated in nutritional biochemistry, digestive health and its systemic effects, as well as functional endocrinology, ART, which is the active release technique methodology. And he also has his functional diagnostic nutrition certification. Dr. Jackson.
Actually, let me correct you just right there. I don't have my FDN. I was curious about it and was going to do it, and then realized that just, other stuff came up. So I'm working on my CNS. Gotcha.
Okay. So he's concentrating in other areas then, but he did train with Dr. Kendall Stewart, who's an MD, to learn the far-reaching implication of methylation deficits and their role in neuroimmune syndrome. So combining all of that information, he's not just a physical therapist. He's not just got this huge mind full of endocrinology information. You guys, his mind is insane to me. And one of the reasons I'm bringing Dr. Tim to you guys is because I am that health coach that is teaching other health coaches that we have this responsibility, I think, to get underneath why our clients and maybe even our family members and ourselves are not getting well from the things that are going on in our bodies. Okay, so we are going to talk about mold. I am going to share the slide deck here, and we are going to do the best we can to coordinate without Dr. Tim seeing everything. I'm going to give him some guidance, and give me one moment, and I will share my screen in just a minute with you guys. So Kathy, let me know if you can see our screen here when I pull it up. Kathy, you're always with me, so you're always my touchstone, which I so appreciate. So tell me, can you see the mold and mycotoxin screen? All right, let me check on the chat box and we'll be ready to go. Yes, everybody can see it. Awesome. Okay, they can see the screen. Perfect. Okay, so Dr. Tim, I'm going to go ahead and roll through some of this. I probably do a little more talking on the front end of this because I have to do the slide part, but you guys, we're talking about mold and mycotoxins today, and it's called an overlooked threat and why you should care for a reason, because it's that under discussed problem. It's under talked about. It's lots of information out there that nobody is really covering when it comes to why people are unwell. Mold is one of those things. So hold on just a moment, you guys. I'm seeing a problem here again. We are just not having the luck today, Tim.
I know.
We're not. I don't understand. Hold on just a moment, you guys. And I promise you, usually things roll really well, but today is just not the day, I don't think. Hold on. Tim, why don't you talk a little bit? Why don't you start the discussion about mold and the things that people don't know about it?
Yeah, I call it, like you mentioned, one of the hidden threats along with EMS, because it's one of those two things I really have to hammer home over and over and over again to people, because they can't see them. They don't realize the effect that they're eliciting or causing in their body. In short, mold toxicity will just create massive amounts of inflammation throughout the body. And there's two different issues you can have with mold. You can have both of them, or you can just have one of them. The one I'm going to focus on today is not being able to detoxify mold. And that gets into the genetics, which we'll get into a little bit later. But that is a separate issue than having an allergy to mold. You can certainly have both, but with this detoxification issue, there's basically 5 levels of a certain gene in our immune system, and any one of those, 25% of the population will have one of those. And that means that your immune system can't properly label mold and mycotoxins, and therefore you can't excrete them, and so they build up in the body, specifically in fatty tissue, especially the gallbladder. And if you have poor bile flow anyway, that's going to make it even worse. And so they basically sit there in the body, triggering these huge inflammatory reactions, disrupting hormonal pathways, affecting your energy production, affecting your hormone receptors. There have been studies done on brain imaging where they looked at patients with MS and patients with mold toxicity, and their frontal lobes looked exactly the same in both.
Okay, hold on just a moment, because I got our slides working, and I'm gonna roll right through to the next page so we can get back on track. because that's a great introduction. Because I know even with just what you just said, there's going to be a lot of people going, what did he talk about? The brain? I mean, like yes, it can affect your brain. So let's just talk a little bit. Let me put it in some perspective for you guys. We are going to learn about the difference between mold and yeast. We're going to talk about where we find them, what causes health issues, what the signs and symptoms are. We're going to talk about the testing, how to get it out of your environment, whether it's your home or your office, and a little bit about how to heal from it. And from what Tim just talked about, what can prevent a person from healing from this? Now, just know that when I'm using this word heal, that I am using it in a very non-descriptive way, an educational, informative way, and that anything we talk about today, you guys, is not prescription. It's just us sharing great, valuable information and education for you guys to either take your health further or to help your clients move forward in their own health. So let me back us up just a little bit, and let's talk a little bit about mold. First, the difference between mold and yeast. So first, you say here that mold is a multicellular organism and it exists in long filaments. Kind of remember that we are talking to a lot of people here that this is the first time they've heard about mold and yeast. So let's keep it, in a little bit layman's terms here. Tell us where it can be found and tell us what that means.
Okay, so let me start with yeast. So everyone I'm sure has heard of Candida or Candida albicans in the body. That's an example of a yeast. And it's supposed to be symbiotic, but under the right conditions, when your immune system's not working well, your hormones are out of balance, or you have too many heavy metals, then you can have, or you consume too many carbohydrates, you can have yeast overgrowth. And that's when Candida not only grows too much in the gut, but also will leach through the leaky gut into the bloodstream, creating a system-wide inflammation. And Candida is very well known for releasing different endotoxins that can lead to autoimmunity.
Okay, so let me say this real quick. When you say overgrowth of Candida, overgrowth of yeast in the system, like most of us as health coaches and some of us as women, right? We're familiar with overgrowth of Candida, and we know, well, if you get a yeast infection, you go to the doctor and you get a diflucan antifungal pill and all is well. And as I know from, learning about this over years, and you're here with us, tell us why that is not necessarily the case, that you can't just take an antifungal pill and fix this problem.
Well, number one, let me just make two important comments about diflucan. It's been way overused for too many years, so there's some resistance to it. And if you look at the package insert for it, it actually turns off your adrenals. So you can't test cortisol levels for like a month, 4 to 6 weeks after discontinuing diflucan.
Wow.
So that's two important things to remember.
Yeah.
But that aside, the other reason you can't just take an antifungal and be done with it is because we're dealing again with the inability to detox. Killing the mold may be part of the remediation plan, but it's going to stay in your body, and you're just going to recycle those mycotoxins between your liver and your gallbladder over and over and over again. Because what we're discussing here, the biggest issue is that our immune systems, if we're part of that 25% of the population, it doesn't label the mold. And so your immune system doesn't get alerted to it, and you're not able to excrete it.
Okay. So you're saying that's the same thing with yeast and mold then, because the slide that I've got up, we're talking about mold, which is multicellular, and yeast, which are unicellular. So is the same problem, does the same problem with mold and yeast about excretion and clearing?
No, the problem doesn't occur, at least to my knowledge, to any appreciable degree in yeast. Okay. That's just more of, you're going to have die-off, you're going to have aldehyde, you're going to have different endotoxins that disrupt cellular function, and you can certainly have die-off reactions. And a lot of times when you're doing a yeast cleanse, you may see the passage of yeast in the stool. But, again, yeast are separate. They're somewhat related, but we're focusing mostly on mold and mycotoxins here, which are different than Candida. Okay.
All right. So let's move. We're going to move into the next slide about where we can find mold. So I know that, like I used to live in a house, ranch on a basement, 1978 house. You know, I had this black, you know, mold growing up in the corner. Of course, I freak out, don't want to move in, you know, and my husband's like, oh my gosh, are you kidding? Just spray some bleach on it. Typical female health coach behavior. Well, I'm like, I'm not going to live there. You know, we ended up living in that house for 13 years. We ended up spraying it and it went away. So let's talk about the fact that it doesn't just happen in old homes, right? So talk to us about, where do you find it? Old homes, new homes, not just basements, but what else?
You find it everywhere. You find it anywhere there's a source of humidity or dampness and darkness.
Okay.
And so just to give you, you know, an anecdotal story, I have a couple of clients who are millionaires and have mansions, and, you know, they swear up and down that, you know, they don't have mold. And I had to explain to them very delicately that if you have mold in your house, it's not a knock against your hygiene or your cleaning. So the way that they build houses these days, it's to be as energy efficient as possible. And that energy efficiency is good for your electric bill, but it comes at a cost. And so what happens is you end up with just a couple of species of mold, because you're going to always have mold, you know, outside. The problem happens when there's not a good exchange between outdoor air and indoor air.
Okay.
That leads to the overgrowth of mold. And the most important thing to understand here is that when most of the time when I say mold, if people know about it, they think of black mold, but that's just one kind of thousands of different types of mold. So in order to test, you know, this gets into a little bit of the other slide, you know, there are specific tests that you want to do, not the ones from Lowe's and Home Depot. Those aren't accurate. You want to do to
Let's
check.
not go there. Yeah, hold on. We can't go there yet because that's down the road. I want to keep going on our slide here, or we're going to lose track. So let's talk about what does cause the health problems. That's where we're at right now. So we're on the slide where you talked about mold doesn't actually cause the problem, and you talked about mycotoxins that cause the problem. But tell us a little bit about, what is a mycotoxin? How does it stimulate the immune system?
Mycotoxins are the byproducts or the metabolites released from the mold. So it's sort of like the analogy that we talked about before. You know, when you have a virus, technically it's not the virus that's making you feel bad, it's the inflammation that it's creating.
Right.
So in this case, it's a somewhat similar situation in that mold will release mycotoxins. I'm just going to throw out the names of these just to plant a seed.
Yep.
I don't expect people to remember them, but it's important because they have such huge ramifications for your health.
Yep.
So one is called a gliotoxin, Glio toxin. And that one is one that can disarm 5 different types of your immune cells and really wreak havoc on your brain. That's all you need to know about it.
Okay.
Okay. There are many other types of mycotoxins. One is called trichothecenes, and that's the one that's typically released from black mold.
Okay.
And so, you know, again, I wrote, or I have on my slide, that it stimulates the immune system. It does stimulate it in the sense that it causes an inflammatory response.
Okay.
But on the other side of the coin, it shuts down the immune system. A lot of your immune cells get turned off. So it's important for people to understand that your immune system, it isn't just on or off. There are parts of it that can be turned on really high, and other parts that might be suppressed. Other types of effects, negative effects that these mycotoxins can have, and this is in the notes section, but the first place they go when they get into your cells are the mitochondria, which are the batteries of your cells that produce energy. So, you know, that's a huge stressor right there. So that's where the symptom of chronic fatigue and malaise comes in. Immune suppression, we already talked about. Nasal sinusitis. Most nasal infections and sinus infections are actually fungal in nature. Allergy to just generalized allergies, asthma, brain fog, and even brain damage if it happens, you know, long enough.
Okay.
And again, what you have to remember is that, you know, if we have 100 people in a line, 25% or 25 of them are going to notice these effects from even small amounts of mycotoxins, whereas the other 75 people are going to be thinking, these people are crazy. There's nothing wrong with this house.
Right.
That sort of thing.
Okay, so we're going to move into that slide in a minute, though. But I do want to ask you something. I want to back up for a minute. And just, you have on here a leaky gut that refuses to heal. So one thing I want to say about all of these signs and symptoms that I have up on this slide is that, when Dr. Tim is talking about stressors and stressors to the body and all of that, we have to remember that anything, it's not just financial, it's not just the things that people think are stressful. It could be anything your body feels is stressful. So if you think that you get, you normally get 9 hours of sleep and you only got, 8 hours and 30 minutes one night, your body may feel that's too much for you. So like we're opening up these are stressors to the body that open things up for this to take hold, even more than just the fact that you could be one of those 25 people, right?
Right. Yeah. I mean, if you're one of those 25 people, you may have a history of recurrent ear infections as a child. You may have a history of using asthma inhalers. You may have exercise-induced asthma. You may just have shortness of breath sometimes. The different mycotoxins, like I said, there are many different ones, can have different effects, but the bottom line is that the commonality amongst all of them is that they create a lot of inflammation and they disrupt your immune system.
Okay. So I have, the questions are starting to come in, but I'm going to hold those because I think that we're going to be able to answer some of these as we go through. But you guys, just as an FYI, any questions you may have, the Q&A box is the best place to put them, and I will definitely get to them. I'm not ignoring you, and I do see them. But I think we're going to be able to answer some of these as we go along. So let's roll into the next slide that talks about, you were just briefly touching on mold detoxification issues, and you talked a little bit about the 25% population. And I have the slide up that has the one version of the HLA-DR genotype. So before we roll through the rest of the bullets, which I might kind of lead you through in a minute here, Tim, tell me about that. How do you find out if you have that? Is this a 23andMe thing, or how do you find out if you have that?
No, unfortunately, I've been asking that question for years, but the answer I've been getting is no. But you can order it. If you look at the resources slide at the end of the presentation, Dr. Shoemaker's website has the lab test on there, the HLA-DR, and I believe they even have the LabCorp code on there. Okay,
I'll share that one at the end for sure.
Yeah, and so what happens is you get that tested, and then when it comes back, you can either use Dr. Shoemaker's book, like I have the Mold Warriors book, and it helps you decode your gene to tell you which combination you have. But there's also a website I found a few months ago that will also do it, because it comes back in a language that really won't mean much to us. But like I said, there are 5 different levels, and myself, Dave Asprey, we have the dreaded genotype, which means we have the most severe form, and so we have to, be a little more vigilant. And this is off topic, but that's why Dave, developed the coffee, because as we'll get into later, it's not just mold in your house or in your office. It can be mold in your car. It can be low-level mycotoxins in certain foods. And so if you have one of these genetic issues, that can become a problem. Right. Other people, they'll say, oh, well, there's no proof of that. Well, the proof's in the pudding. I mean, if you drink it or eat it and you feel bad, there's obviously a food sensitivity or a histamine issue or a mycotoxin issue, something along those lines.
Right.
And this genetic issue, the HLA-DR, that's the one where if you have one form of it, your immune system won't recognize mycotoxins, and so they just build up in the body.
Okay, so that's a good place to kind of bring in a little touch of a personal story for me too, because I was doing the Bulletproof coffee when he first started it at the tune of, I think it was like, what, $18 or $20 a bag. That gets expensive when you're a regular coffee drinker. And I remember hearing the word mycotoxins. I'm like, well, I don't want to be eating mycotoxins or drinking them. So I started buying the Bulletproof coffee. I don't do it anymore because of the sheer cost of it at the time. And, other things were more important. I kind of got out of the habit of it. But tell me, let's use coffee as a good example, because most people are going to be drinking coffee. I mean, truly. if we are regularly
Yeah.
drinking coffee that is laced with these mycotoxins, and you say it leads on the slide to a buildup of the mycotoxins, is this like something that it's like a cumulative effect? Like one day, you know, we're like, well, I don't have a problem with coffee. I've been drinking it for 15 years. And then all of a sudden one day you're like, I'm tired. My nose won't stop running. Could it be from a buildup from repeatedly drinking coffee, for example?
It could be, certainly if you have the dreaded genotype, but usually it's a combination of exposures, you know, especially if you live in a high humidity environment like the southeastern United States.
Okay.
But generally, like I said, it's a combination. And so, you know, I know we're going to get into testing later, but if someone has a high body burden of mold, I can't tell you for certain that, you know, that mold or those mycotoxins came from your house or your office or your car. But, you know, what we do know is that people in high humidity environments have to be more vigilant in terms of bulletproofing their house and just overall avoidance if they have one of these genetic glitches, so to speak.
Okay. All right. So let's move into the mold testing that you just mentioned. And you have some notes here about testing the total mycotoxin load, you know, tests about the urine, notes about the test through the urine and through LabCorp and so on. So talk a little bit about that. Like what are the best ways to test for this, and touch on that total mycotoxin load too. What's the difference? Is this like total testosterone, free testosterone we're talking about here, or what does that mean?
No, so we want to get an idea of your total body burden of mycotoxins. And that's done through a urine test through a lab known as real-time labs. Now, there's some certain specific things you have to do if you have one of these genotypes before that test. And I don't want to get into them because it'll take us way too far off task, but let's just say if you're a poor excreter of mycotoxins, you're going to need to do some things to give us a more accurate representation of the mycotoxin levels that are in your body. So if we just do a urine test and we're able to get an accurate representation, you know, part of it could be coming from your office, part of it could be your home, part of it could be, you know, like I get a lot of teachers that are exposed to mold because schools, what they do, because most doctors haven't caught on to treating mold yet, they paint over on the top ceiling tiles, you know, and that certainly doesn't kill the molds. The mold and mycotoxins are still there, and that's, you know, the thought amongst the mold community and mold cognitive physicians is that certainly contributes to some degree to learning disorders.
Okay, so in other words, those stained panels, when they take the stained panel out, they replace the panel with a nice white clean one, or they paint over it, but underneath that panel is still a moisture problem that's growing mold.
Right, exactly. And there's no need to remediate the mold if you're not going to address the moisture issue as well, because it's going to come right back and you're just going to waste your money.
Okay.
So as far as testing your total mycotoxin load in your body, again, that's a urine test, but then we want to also test your environment, right? Because there's no need to start anyone on a mold detox plan or remediation plan if they're constantly exposed. And so the tests, I think, are listed on the next slide.
Yep.
But what's that?
I was just saying, yeah, you're on the next slide. You were talking earlier about how don't just go to Home Depot, don't just go to Lowe's. What kind of kits can you get?
Those tests are not accurate. So there's a couple different tests that are accurate. One's called an ERMI, capital E-R-M-I. You don't even know what it stands for. And it's on one of those websites. It's on the mycometrics.com website, which is listed on the resource slide.
Okay, I'm typing it up, so yeah. Yep.
People can order themselves. They don't need me to do it. You know, I can certainly help them with the interpretation of it. And there is another one through the same company called Hurts Me Too, which is a little newer, a little more accurate.
Tell me how that's spelled. Tell me how that's spelled. Hurts Me Too.
Capital H-E-R-T.
Okay.
S-M-I-2.
Yep. Okay. -2. Got it. I just want to give them a general idea. So yeah. Okay.
Yeah, those two tests are the most common. But recently I've gotten good feedback. The same lab that I mentioned for the urine mycotoxin test, they also offer a home environment test.
Okay.
And I had someone have really good results with using that test. So I will warn people going back to the urine mycotoxin test. The first one that you do, it's very expensive, but the subsequent ones to monitor your progress are much cheaper. So
Okay.
the first one is usually around $730,
Mm.
but the follow-ups are usually around $250, which is still expensive, but a lot less than $750.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So we're going to move into a reminder, and then and then we're going to be talking about how to remove this stuff. And then I'm going to tackle some really great high mileage questions on the Q&A. So just as the reminders that genetics are important because a tiny amount of mold may affect you differently than others. So let me just touch on that real quick, is to say that if you're living in a house with 3 other family members and everyone else feels fine, but you don't, the possibility is that you have that HLA-DR genotype and they don't, kind of thing, right? So some people you may have the same amount of load in the house, but you just cannot get rid of it out of your body like, other people can.
Right. So, you might have, one parent, one child responding negatively and having symptoms, and another parent is thinking, there's no mold here. But again, it relates back to that 25% of the population and, your inability to detoxify it.
Yeah.
And if you have mold in your home and you also work from your home, then that's kind of a triple whammy.
Yeah.
And what we have to remember, again, I've said it, like 3 or 4 times now, in fact, almost all the different types of mold out there you cannot physically see does not mean there's not a mold issue present. There won't even be an odor a lot of times. In my parents' house, there was no visible signs of mold and no odor. And their house is 10 years old, 12 years old. So you have to do the testing. That's why testing is so important, to see if there is mold present and is it above the threshold that's healthy. And I want to put a little asterisk there because, if we just look at someone's ERMI test, that test that I mentioned earlier, and they don't have any of the genotypes that interfere with mold detox, then the level on their test, the level of mold may be acceptable. But if you have one of those genotypes, you're going to need a much lower level, lower score than someone without one of the genotypes, because you're not able to detox it.
Yeah, and this is an important point to make here. I also wanted to let you guys just kind of think about this as well, is when, for health coaches, one of the first places we automatically think is, when a client may come to us and they say, my daughter is struggling with ADHD, or my son has, this rash that won't go away, we automatically go, what are they eating, right? And so for those of you who aren't health coaches, but you're on and you have children that are struggling with things, and maybe you've adopted a gluten-free, dairy-free, soy-free, some say fun-free lifestyle, which I disagree with, but and you have children that are dealing with attention deficit disorder or other things that you're just sitting there going, we have done everything we can. I don't know what else to do. This could be the problem. This could be the missing piece for so many people out there, that it's, don't automatically think that everything relates just to food. There are these unseen dangers for people, and that's what we're really touching on today. So let's lean into how to remove it. And you say remediator. So, first I want you to describe what remediation means, and then I want you to walk through how to find one, and then go through those steps that you've got listed here, which by heart, I'm quite sure.
Yeah. So, well, first of all, let me make the statement that bleach, according to, I think it was the American Academy of Environmental Medicine, does not kill mold. They came out with a position statement that said that. It may have some minor effects on a few different species, but it should never be relied upon as a remediation tool.
Okay.
In fact, it can actually, what happens is when you throw stuff like bleach or other antimicrobial agents on a mold, it kills it, but they still release mycotoxins. And those mycotoxins are dead, but they still stimulate your immune system. So we have to remember that. So the safest way that I've found, I've been studying mold since 2009 because an MD friend of mine, his father-in-law, was basically studying some of the hormones that are affected by mold at NIH. And, you know, with mold, you know, like I said, you got to test not just your body, but the house, you know, your car, potentially if you've had water damage or if you have a sunroof, or, you know, you've had spilt drinks or anything like that. But as far as finding a remediator, the best one I've been able to find is someone who uses a product called EM100.
Okay.
And I have no financial connection to this product at all. Now, you could order some as, you know, just a regular person, but they make you buy such large amounts that typically you're going to have to, you know, go through a remediator. And so it's typically word of mouth. I can put people in touch with a guy I know, but he's so busy. He travels all over the U.S. There are I will warn people that there are a lot of people out there in the mold remediation business that will come into your house and look around for less than 5 minutes and say, okay, we need to take down this wall and this wall, and do this and this, and oh, the bill is $50,000. And so you got to be very careful. I wish there was some, you know, gold star or something that we could look for, but people certified in this, and I'm going to double check the name of it, but I think it's EM-100.
Okay.
What it is a biodegradable enzyme. So instead of releasing mycotoxins, it just kind of digests them, eats them up like a little Pac-Man.
Okay. That makes sense. Okay. So you're talking about here also, you know, those very simple steps of removing mold for all of us is to make sure, you know, moisture is addressed. But when you say that, and I remember when I talked to you about this, when I first hired you to help me with some of my health stuff, and you said, do you have a dehumidifier? Because we've got 3-story house and we've got, you know, it's 3,600 square feet. It's a wide and tall house. And you were like, okay, you have a dehumidifier in the very bottom floor, like in the basement. And I'm like, yes. And you're like, how many do you have? And I'm like, well, just one. And you're like, okay, you may need more than that. So talk about well, how many humidifiers do you actually need to make sure that this stuff is controlled? How do you determine that fact?
Well, what you can do is, and this is something you actually can buy from Home Depot or Lowe's, but dehumidifier with a sensor underneath the house, as well as a sensor in the house. In general, and some people are going to think this is kind of extreme, but based on Dr. Shoemaker's work, he says you don't want the indoor humidity to get above 50 to 55%. That's when mold starts forming.
How do you know that? Is that the sensor?
Well, so that's where the sensor comes in. The sensor that you can get from Home Depot, Lowe's, the one that I have is a digital.
That's what we have. Now that you're saying that, I'm like, that's what that number means on that thing. I just turn it on and empty it and clean it out. Okay, good.
And so most people are going to need at least, I mean, the average size house is going to need at least 2 dehumidifiers underneath the home.
Okay.
And at least one on the inside. So that you know, is going to take care of the humidity issue. But, you know, depending on your environment, you may have to add more.
When you say underneath, now let me say this. The house we looked at before we moved into this one was covered in mold. That was one of the reasons I got a home inspection on that house, was because it had a smell to it, of course. When you say underneath, they had a crawl space that was just covered in it. Are you talking about having a humidifier underneath in a crawl space in a home?
You could some people will put them in the crawl space or right near the beginning of the crawl space.
Okay.
But you certainly need to have at least 2. And then again, as far as annually or yearly, you want to have the ductwork cleaned and make sure that it's suctioned out.
Okay.
And see, mycotoxins are very, very small. That's something important to know. So the type of filter, and I don't mean like filter that you plug into the wall, but the one that you put in the vent.
Yep. You
want to look for what's called a MERV 11 filter. Okay.
Spell that.
It's capital MERV-11.
Okay.
Hospitals will typically use MERV 14, which is, you know, 3 steps more protection.
Mm-hmm.
The MERV 11 you will have to get online, is my understanding. I haven't seen them in any hardware stores or anything.
Okay.
But they can help to catch some of the mycotoxins.
Okay, I gotcha.
Okay? So that's one area. The other type of air filter, like the HEPA filters, the high-end ones that you plug in, there's several brands out there. Some of them go all the way up to 5,000.
Yeah.
Yeah, but the good news is a lot of times the company will allow you to use it for 30 days. If it doesn't make a difference, you can return it minus shipping. But there are a lot of people, especially in the mold groups on Facebook, who did, before and after mycotoxin testing and found a significant difference with some of the higher end ones. But, like I said, you can look for a used one. You can try it for 30 days. Generally, people that have one of the genotypes, especially the dreaded genotype, may need one of those.
Okay.
Higher end ones.
Okay. All right. So let's roll into the next webinar. So we're starting to get a lot more, slide deck, a lot more questions. I want to make sure we stay on time here. So let's talk about how do you detox? And that's one of the questions also that Michelle is asking. So how do you detox mold from the home? But let me read hers aloud because she is currently dealing with this problem and living in the environment. And I understand she is in the process of getting out of it. But she says, what's the best advice for dealing with mold while in it? Continuous detoxing methods or things to help keep the beast down, so to speak, to manage symptoms. So why don't you answer Michelle's question if she can't get out of it right away, and then move into what other people can do, or maybe tie it together.
There are certain essential oils that you can diffuse that will essentially paralyze the mycotoxins.
And those are?
I'm not an essential oils expert, but thieves, oil of thyme, propolis, those are three that supposedly work well according to Dr. Klinghardt.
Okay.
And then that product that I mentioned earlier, the EM100, they supposedly have a product that you can buy for your home called Matrix Microbes. Or Matrix Microbial. Yeah, MATRIX.
Got it.
And it's a spray that basically will help to keep the levels down.
Okay.
The other thing she can do, besides that, is to address the moisture source. The room she spends the most time in, keep the humidity down. And one aside that I want to mention about the humidifiers is you have to be careful with them. You don't want water sitting still for a long period of time, or black mold will actually form in the bottom of your dehumidifier.
Yeah, that's what happened when we moved into this house. I went over to the humidifier and I was like, oh my gosh, what is that? Like I looked in it and it was black. There was black mold all in the water tank of the humidifier. So I cleaned it out and bleached it and used this other spray and all that, but I don't think it had ever been cleaned.
Right. And so those are things she can do. She can certainly use binders, but that's just trying to basically help her tread water.
Right.
I think the essential oils, the Matrix Microbe Spray, air filter, dehumidifier, you'll probably get more bang for your buck.
Okay. Touch on binders. Touch on binders. So people who don't know what binders are, charcoal and what else?
So binders are compounds that are going to bind up both toxins and nutrients. So you take them on an empty stomach, away from any meals or supplements. Some examples, activated charcoal is one. I typically don't use that a lot for mold, but you can. There's another one called Toxicity Supreme. You can type that down for people.
Yeah, I have that one. Oh, yeah.
That one, it's basically, you might not like the taste, but to me, I don't even really taste anything.
It's not the taste. It's not the taste. It's the fact that I am clumsy with small objects. And when I scooped the spoon out, I ended up with everything around me was black. It was like I brought dirt in from the garden. I was like, but I still use it. Don't get me wrong. I'm using it because
operator error.
Yes, operator error is absolutely the truth. So, so Toxicity Supreme, and I know I'm going to get a lot of questions about that one because I'm actually using it, and people usually like to know what I think. So, that one, and then what about clay? What about bentonite clay?
Yeah, people ask me about that one. You can only get around to using so many supplements.
Yep.
I typically use a combination of either the one other binder I use is Pectisol, or apple pectin,
Okay.
which also helps to bind up metals. And again, you know, these are on an empty stomach. Keys with these is that you have to keep the bowels moving. So if you've never done coffee enemas, this might be the time to start.
Yeah.
Because you want to make sure that you're moving 2 to 3 times a day. And what a lot of people forget is that coffee enemas, yeah, they are kind of cleaning out the colon, but they have a greater focus or effect on the liver.
Yes.
And they increase glutathione by up to 600%.
Yes.
So the bottom line is you don't want to bind up these mycotoxins and just have them sit there, because they're going to just continue to create inflammation.
Yes, great point. So let me make a statement about that, because I have experience with all of those things: clay, charcoal, Takasimi Supreme. I did coffee enemas years ago and still do them today. Not today, but you know what I mean, currently.
Yeah.
But here's the thing, you guys, we can take all that stuff we want to bind things up, as he was just saying, but then if we are constipated from something that's causing problems in our system, if our clients aren't moving their bowels, let me just say, one a day is not normal. Things aren't moving out and the liver is congested and all of that. Like he's saying, Dr. Tim is telling you, you know, it is important to find a way to eliminate. That doesn't actually, like some people I know take senna tea, or they're using, you know, extra fiber and things like that to try and have bowel movements. But coffee enemas are super powerful because they're stimulating the liver, right? The caffeine stimulates the liver to help move things through as well. So it's not comfortable, but you know what? It works. I can tell you that from firsthand experience. It works. You feel like a different person.
And let me throw this in there, and this is based on scientific research and medical research, is that certain mycotoxins will shut down the glutathione pathway, basically. Mm-hmm. And glutathione is, you know, one of your main detoxifiers.
The master, correct?
What's that?
It's like your master detoxifier. It's the big daddy.
Yeah, it's your master detoxifier, exactly. And so, you know, it shuts down immune cells. We talked about that, but also shuts down your glutathione levels. And a lot of us are already deficient in glutathione. So that's another area where coffee enemas can help as well.
Yeah.
So I usually approach detoxing mold from 2 different angles. One being the binding angle that you mentioned.
Yep.
And the other being the basically flushing out strategy. And that involves something called a lipid exchange protocol, which I'll explain, or the PK protocol. It's named after a lady named Patricia Kane.
Okay.
And what it involves, you can do it IV. I've had great success with clients doing it orally. Some people, if they have access to the IVs, they might do like 1 IV every 2 weeks, and then the other day they'll do it orally. But it involves taking high doses of phosphatidylcholine along with ox bile and lipase to make sure you're digesting the fat. And what that does, phosphatidylcholine is an essential component of our cell membrane, but it basically helps to flush out the fat-soluble toxins out of a specific part of the gallbladder called the sphincter of Oddi. And so you start out typically with 2 to 3 capsules of phosphatidylcholine, and you take it at night with your evening meal, because your gallbladder detoxes during the first few hours of sleep. And you work up to around 9 to 11 capsules of phosphatidylcholine. Again, and you take the lipase, fat digesting enzyme, and the ox bile to help with assimilation of the phosphatidylcholine. Okay. And you may have loose bowels for the first few days, even the first week, because you are excreting a lot of fat lipid-soluble toxins that have been built up over time. You may even notice some discoloration in the stool. But again, this is approaching it from 2 different ways. Binding it up and excreting it out, but also basically making your cell membranes optimal so that you can flush out these mycotoxins.
Okay, that's perfect explanation. I've used ox bile and lipase and all of that actually years ago. Now I remember reading something about some people who don't tolerate ox bile. Is it people who talk a little bit about that? Because I don't know if this is just because, like, if you buy a black car, you see black cars every day. But I had a client with
Mm-hmm.
gallbladder issues, and the next thing I know, like all of my coaches are dealing with clients, or they themselves or their family is dealing with gallbladder issues. It is becoming like one of those things where you think thyroid is an epidemic. I'm starting to think gallbladder problems are an epidemic.
Well, it's directly related to the thyroid epidemic.
Yeah, you're right. But let's not go there because we could do a whole freaking day on thyroid. But tell me a little bit about, is there anyone, because I know a lot of people are probably going to be wanting to run out and grab some oxbile and some lipase and phosphatidylcholine and get started on something like this. But is there anyone that shouldn't be using these types of supplements? Anyone who can't methylate things properly? Like, are there any warnings you want to throw out?
Well, with the behavior, the pH in the bowel and the large intestine determines the behavior of the bacteria. And so if you don't need oxbile, the way you would determine if you really needed oxbile would be to do a stool test and see if there's any fat malabsorption. Okay.
Yep.
And so if you don't need it and you add it in, it may change the entire digestive sequencing of the gut.
Okay.
It may throw off the stomach pH, all those things. Other reasons people may not tolerate it at first, like I said, is that a lot of times the companies that sell it, they start out in really high doses, like 500 milligrams or 250 milligrams. Some people may only need 50 to 75 milligrams. And again, you want to start slow and make sure that you're going to the bathroom at least 2 to 3 times a day.
Okay.
Oxbile, again, like I said, it changes the pH, and that can change the behavior of the bugs. So indirectly, sometimes there may be some die-off effects as well. Okay. So it's hard to really pinpoint without testing, but there can be a number of things that can cause you to not react well to oxbile. But like with everything else, I tell people to start at a low dose and, go slowly. You don't need to take it with snacks. Even if you have fat malabsorption issues on a stool test, you only need to take it with fat-containing meals and larger meals.
Okay. All right, let's get to some questions because we're getting up on, even though we started late, we're getting up on the hour, and I have a kid to pick up from school. So let's answer some questions. All right, Leah is asking, she says, I live in New Orleans and our house is a bathroom with no windows. It constantly feels damp and mold goes quickly in the grout within a day or two of scouring my tub. How can I address this naturally? Everyone here sprays everything with bleach and my kids bathe there, and my daughter, her bedroom is right across the bathroom. And I have to tell you, that we moved into this house and it's got the whole bathroom is ceramic tile and glass. And I have the same problem in my bathroom where it's like, I think it's 3 days, 4 days later, I'll start to see the black growing on the grout. And I too don't like to use bleach. So tell us if, how can we do this without getting poisoned?
Right. So the TM100 product that I mentioned and the Matrix Myco product,
okay.
If you hire someone to remediate and they use that product, you do have to leave your home for, I think, 36 hours. But it's a lot safer than using something like ozone or bleach, which, isn't that effective and toxic. But, she's going to have to do a very aggressive protocol to keep the humidity levels underneath the house and inside the house down. And I trust me, I live in the South.
Maybe a mini humidifier in the bathroom, would that be helpful?
Yeah, I wouldn't put a mini. I'd probably put a large one.
Oh, okay.
I'd probably put a large one. Yeah,
well, if it's depending on the size of the bathroom, of course, but that's part of the problem with mine. That's part of the problem with my bathroom is it's a big bathroom. It's, got a walk-in shower, a giant tub, double sinks, and no fan in the ceiling for humidity. It doesn't make any sense at all, but that's going to be something I'm going to have to bring in too. Yeah.
Well,
okay.
Yeah, and trust me, I live an hour from the beach, so I feel your pain. We have to go to more expensive lengths, but it's something where you want functionality overlooked for certain.
Absolutely. Okay.
But to further answer her question, she's probably going to also be one of those people who would benefit greatly from one of the higher end air filters. And what I have people do is, I don't know if she works from home or not, but keep the air filter in the rooms where they spend most of the time. And then around at nighttime, about an hour before bed, move it into there.
Okay. Okay. Good idea. And I've got one of those metal ones, that you have to clean, you have to wipe it and then you have to put it back in. And I noticed that it definitely quickly needs to be changed or cleaned out,
Yeah, and these higher end filters will also catch volatile organic compounds, just as an aside. So, they catch multiple different types of toxins. And one thing I wanted to throw out there is that indoor air has been proven to be roughly 5 times as toxic as outdoor air.
Of course it does. Of course. Okay. So Kathy's asking, how do you know if you're a poor mycotoxin excreter?
So that would be the HLA-DR test.
Okay.
And if you go to the resources slide.
Yep, I'm on it right now.
Yes, there's moldwarriors.com and survivingmold.com. Both of those are Dr. Shoemaker's site.
Okay.
And they will have the HLA-DR test on there. I know LabCorp does it. I don't think that Quest does it. But that's something that, you get the results back and you either look at the back of the Mold Warriors book. There's a guide to help interpret the numbers.
Okay.
Or there's a website, if you just Google it, it will help interpret it. But I'd be happy to work with her to, clarify, exactly what genotype she has. But having any level of the potential 5 genotypes will impact your ability to get rid of mycotoxins.
Okay. And Marzena asked a couple of follow-up questions about the tests, like the home surroundings. Those were much earlier in the call. So those, you can find those tests further up in the feed that I've typed into the chat, Marzena. And she said, wait a minute, let's see. What if you don't have a crawl space for a dehumidifier under the house? Lots of houses don't. Where would you put it? Just on your main floor?
She's saying that they don't have a crawl space, but there's no area underneath that, so there's no area to put it underneath the house.
Yeah, lots of houses don't have any vents or ways to get access to the house. I mean, real ways to access the house without digging up the foundation and things like that.
Yeah, I would say definitely have several large dehumidifiers in the house.
Okay.
To keep the humidity down. Again, after remediation is done, you want to keep the humidity down in order to prevent recolonization. And, you also want to filter out the mycotoxins with one of those MERV 11 filters, the one that goes in the vent. They're very inexpensive. And then, most likely invest in one of the higher end air filters that will keep mycotoxins down. And, buy an essential oil diffuser. They're like $30, and use things like propolis and MERV and oil of thyme, and then that matrix microbe spray. So it's really like a 3-pronged approach.
Okay.
Especially if you're living in a humid area.
Right. Okay. So Michelle Moreland asks, could someone who is sensitive to caffeine do a coffee enema? I have no experience with this. Go ahead.
Possibly. What you can do is start out with like a third or a fourth of the recommended amount of coffee. There's other organic coffees online that I've seen people ask me about, but I haven't ever found any third-party testing of those. Like Dave Asprey does third-party testing to show that the mycotoxin level is low. So if you're going to drink coffee, again, I don't make any money off of Bulletproof, but I think it's worth it.
No, she's talking about coffee enemas. Like if someone is sensitive to coffee and they do a coffee enema.
Yeah, that's what I'm talking about too.
Oh, okay.
But you still don't want to be putting mycotoxins into your body.
Yeah.
Even if most of it's going to get flushed out. So coffee enemas are fine. Start slow. If you react negatively to caffeine, start with a fourth of the recommended amount of coffee and just dilute it really well. And just remember that if you have a reaction, it may not be a reaction to the caffeine. It may be you're releasing toxins that, you're kind of opening up the dam, so to speak.
Right. And there are companies out there that sell coffee enema coffee specifically. that they have a different, like you wouldn't drink it. It's made specifically for coffee enemas. I don't have a name right off the bat because it's been, it's been a long time since I've actually ordered a specific brand for that, but they do exist. You can just put that into Google, like coffee enema brand for, coffee or something like that. They make them specifically for that. So, okay. So we are at 1:35. We have no further questions that I can see. I'm going to check one more time, and check the chat box as well. And I just want to, and I've got the resource page up, you guys. So it's been up for quite a few minutes. So if you guys want to make notes of that, I know by using Dr. Shoemaker's site several years ago myself, that you can literally get on there and fall down a rabbit hole of information. But I do want to encourage you, if you are dealing with a mold issue or you are highly suspect that this is what's going on with you, you need to reach out to Dr. Tim because he knows what he's talking about. And so it can be one of those areas. It's just like anything, you guys. It's hard. It can be hard to navigate, and you could be, spending unnecessary money on things you shouldn't. You could be buying things that don't work. So I'm a big believer that if you are very sure or nearly sure, or get testing back, or want to do testing, that something is going on that is related to, mold or maybe methylation, whatever, use someone who knows this stuff. Like, don't waste time and energy, and in using things and people that may not work for you. I learned that the hard way. So I highly recommend you look into his site. As you guys can see, it's healyourbody.org if you want to get more information on how to work with Dr. Tim. You can always ask me if you're in the mentorship and mastery group. I'm always plugging him there. And you can find him there, and you can always ask me for more information too. Leah is asking, can you repeat the name of the filter one more time, please, that you suggest?
Yeah, it's called MERV, capital MERV -11.
Okay.
And again, you'll need to buy those online. I've yet to see them in any stores.
Okay, perfect. All right. Well, I appreciate everybody hanging in there till we got started today. I apologize for the delay. And we are definitely going to be doing a methylation webinar at some point soon. I think it's actually on the calendar. I don't actually have it in front of me. Dr. Tim's coming back to us to bring more information about another topic that people just don't know enough about. So keep your eyes open for registration for that webinar. And for those of you who are, tracking my webinars that are coming up, I am having Trisha Nelson next Tuesday, the 21st at 12:30. We're going to talk about emotional eating. And then for those of you in the Health Coach Mentorship and Mastery group, we are getting real with some brainstorm talking next Friday, the 24th at 12 o'clock. So mark your calendars, keep your eyes open for the replay. And Dr. Tim, thanks again. And just thanks to everybody for hanging in there and being a part of this call today. We really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks, guys. I appreciate it. Thanks for having me on.
Absolutely. And I'll talk to you later.
All right, take care.
Bye.